Hello everyone, and welcome back to The Layman's Perspective, the show where I'm so goddamn happy that we're here on Wednesdays instead of Fridays. Today, we're going to be talking about the second episode of the Disney Plus series, Loki. It's only been 1 week, and my god of mischief did this show get people talking. Every single person I talked to said this is their favorite Disney Plus show, after just one episode. WandaVision was a high bar to beat, I had at least thought, and people are loving this. Back are the days when we're waiting with anxious trepidation for every next episode, dreading the 7 days that come in between. Obviously, this is a spoiler review, like all my other videos are. At this point, I don't really know what you're doing here if you don't know that. Please go watch episode 2 of Loki before you watch my video, then come back and see what I have to say. Alright, let's jump right in, because, we got a lot. Based on the music and the set dressing, you might think that we're in medieval England or the Dark Ages or something, but it was a little bit of a fake out because we see it's actually a Renaissance fair in 1985 Wisconsin. A small Minutemen unit is sent in to pursue the variant, and they track him all the way into a tent. Set to the always fitting I Need a Hero, we then see more of what was hinted at the very end of the first episode, and that is that this variant of Loki is an expert in dispatching TVA personnel for whatever reason. He possesses then kidnaps one while taking out the rest. Now in possession of a TVA time door device on top of all the time canisters that he's been stealing. It's interesting to see here that this variant seems to have mind control powers not unlike the ones that Wanda has displayed to us in previous movies. This isn't a power set that our Loki has, but Mobius does specify in just a little bit that different variants of Loki can come with different power sets. After the title, we then cut to Loki being trained at the TVA as kind of a trainee by a holographic projection of missed minutes. The scene gave me super DMV driver's test kind of vibes, and he's being caught up to speed on some TVA basics because Mobius wants to bring him in on a kind of TVA ride-along of sorts. This is much to the annoyance and aversion of most of the other officers, and in general, there seems to be some sort of stigma towards variants in the TVA, not completely dissimilar to the way that replicants are treated in the Blade Runner universe, if you're familiar with those films. As Mobius begins briefing his team, he tells us and them that the TVA has had to deal with a lot of Lokis. More variants than almost any other kind, in fact. Which, honestly, knowing the character of Loki kind of makes sense. As he speaks, we see some examples of these other variants, including a proper blue frost giant Loki, what appears to be Loki having won the Tour de France, Hulk monster Loki, Norse Loki, and a couple of others. We learn that Loki's ultimate goal here seems to be having an audience with the Timekeepers for some ulterior motive, no doubt to try and work them for his own agenda. They arrive at the fair at the scene of the crime, and immediately Loki starts screwing with them. Okay. At first, it kind of sounds like he's onto something, but very quickly we realize that he's just stalling for no other apparent reason than to just be an ass. He does it just because. Mobius metaphorically pulls Loki back by the ears, and we see an actual visual example of these reset canisters being used in real time to reset the branch timeline in a very, very visually distinct and interesting manner. The accompanying score was also pretty cool. It had some synths and an orchestral swell, but it was all based around the simple core beat of a ticking clock. And that's actually an audible motif that you hear all the time in the show, I've realized. If you go back and you listen for it, there's ticking everywhere. We get a quick scene of Mobius and his superior discussing why using Loki is just a bad idea. Most of it was kind of just unimportant exposition, but I did find it interesting that she tells him that the Timekeepers are following the entirety of this case religiously. This entire situation seems to have them all riled up. When Mobius walks back out, Loki seems mildly nervous that perhaps he shouldn't have screwed with them as much as he did. Really, the entirety of his and Mobius' interactions throughout this episode are kind of an elaborate ballet of cat and mouse deception. Layers upon layers of motives and angles, and they're keeping me guessing constantly as to which character is playing who. Mobius does seem to have the upper hand here, though. He correctly assumes that Loki isn't helping out of the goodness of his heart, but instead only because his ego can't allow for this variant of Loki to prove himself the superior Loki version. Curiously, he also refers to Loki as an ice runt. This show is in general referencing Loki's true parentage much more than anything else has in the MCU, and I kind of like it. It was on this shot of their elevator going down, as well as many of the following shots of the set dressing in the background, that I realized how smart this show really is. All of the TVA's architecture and design are constructed to emphasize the notion of infinity, of things repeating and extending on and on forever. This emphasis of infinity, I believe, was definitively chosen to reflect the infinite and incomprehensible nature of time itself. Very clever, Loki. I see what you're doing there. The show, Loki, not the character. Mobius sets Loki to work, in all honesty, probably just to shut him up and get rid of him. At first, it seems to work. Loki seemingly couldn't care less about the files in front of him. And side note, again, let's take a moment to respect the design of the TVA. Almost everything involved with the TVA is analog. There's no digital, there's no screens, or almost no screens. He's not sifting through documents on a screen, he's rifling through piles of folders, files, and paperwork. Any fleeting technology we do see is heavily influenced by retro tech aesthetics. Things like VHS tapes and CRT monitor screens. Again, just an impressive level of attention to detail. As a variant, Loki really only has access to files pertaining to his own life, and he starts sifting through, again, information about the future that he didn't get to live. And we see another fleeting yet heartbreaking glimpse of Loki's humanity. The camera zooms in on his face and we see that tears well in his eyes as he reads about the destruction of his people and homeland of Asgard as per the events of Thor Ragnarok. Hilariously though, in a blink and you'll miss it line on the paper, if you pause it, you can see right in the bottom right hand corner the name of Thor's little fake Avengers group, the Revengers, as he dubbed them, whom he brought to Asgard to fight Hela. This was a completely unnecessary inclusion, but I thought it was hilarious, and it's little details like this which are why I love the MCU so much. The files give Loki an epiphany, and as he clumsily explains to Mobius, he believes the Loki variant is hiding within apocalypse scenarios on the sacred timeline. His rationale being that because an area and all its inhabitants in an apocalypse are in that moment about to be completely destroyed without a trace, last-moment alterations to those events would not cause a branch timeline. I gotta say, I love how even while he's explaining in earnest, like he can't help but screw with Mobius, kind of like screwing up his lunch.
Might never do it again.
You're hilarious, buddy. They go to test the theory in Pompeii, and out of nowhere, we see that Loki can speak fluent Latin, which I found interesting, and we see ultimately that he was right. Their presence and his words cause no branch because everything and everyone dies there anyways. Super quick though, listen to this.
We are from the future, right? What is the TVA? I mean, it's from the future. It sounds from the future. It's pretty future-y.
This is an excellent question. Where in time is the TVA? If you don't think about it at all, it makes sense for him to say we're from the future, but they're really not. They're not from the future, they're not from the past. They're kind of adjacent. If anything else, they don't really ever say. I think it's time to pull out the old prediction counter, alright guys? Write this down, because I think, if I were a betting man, I'd wager that the entire TVA exists somewhere outside of time and space as it's established in the MCU. Some other kind of extra-dimensional pocket location outside of the normal time-space continuum. We're going to see as the show goes on, but I feel pretty confident about this one. Loki and Mobius go back to the TVA and dwell on their new discoveries, kind of slowly drifting into a very philosophical discussion. And I found it very interesting that Loki kind of berates Mobius here for his belief in the Timekeepers. Even though the TVA, its occupants, and its actions are very real and tangible, Mobius and Loki almost speak about it as if it's any other religion, as if he's operating off of belief and not proof. I also like how Loki keeps referring to the Timekeepers as the 3 space lizards. I think that's pretty funny. Their back and forth gives Mobius an idea, though. He's able to deduce that combined with the gum he finds in 16th century France from the previous episode, that this Loki is hiding within an apocalypse of Earth's future. We hear some amusing future apocalypses that are going to plague Earth, including hurricanes and volcanoes erupting, the extinction of the swallow, before they land on an Alabama hurricane in 2050 as the most likely hiding spot of the Loki variant. They take a fully armed team to Roxcart Warehouse. Now, this is kind of an energy company infamous within the Marvel Comics. I don't think they've been mentioned in the MCU yet, so they're pretty minor players right now. If you've seen WALL-E, it's basically Buy n Large. Think Walmart on super steroids. We're treated to a super cinematic intro of the hurricane scene, and they enter the warehouse. Loki surprisingly displays a high level of maturity in this situation, admitting to Mobius when asked to split up that he understands he needs to earn their trust. We also see that Loki's hunch was indeed right. The variant is hiding here, planning something. This variant of Loki seems to prefer possessing people and using them as puppets. They come across one of these, who upon physical contact transfers the possession to the TVA agent. We get a scene I honestly didn't expect to get as soon as episode 2. Loki facing off with himself. So begins the most engaging game of cat and mouse I think I've ever seen play out on a screen of any size. Who's playing who knows more, who has the upper hand, who's in control? We don't know for most of this interaction. I don't know why I didn't expect it, but the only thing better than one Loki is 2 Lokis. He follows the variant puppet throughout the store, trying to probe for answers and find out what this variant is planning on doing and why. Now, our Loki goes on about how he's planning to betray the TVA, to take control of it and make the variant an offer. I think this is all a bluff. Call me a sucker, but I believe in the goodness of people, and I firmly think that deep down, Loki is enjoying playing the hero instead of the villain for once. I think he's deceiving this evil Loki variant and not the TVA. I think it's kind of a double deception, if that makes sense. One of the puppets kind of throws Loki around as Mobius and the agents, kind of 2 steps behind them, scramble to catch up to the 2 of them. This all culminates in the evil variant pulling off the hood and revealing themselves. That's right, Sophia DiMartino, who a lot of people assumed would be, is playing a female variant of Loki, which I kinda half called during my Loki trailer breakdown, if you recall. So it's very likely that this variant is a character named Lady Loki. The origins of this character are rather detailed and complicated, but I'll try to make a long story short. In the comics, due to a complicated sequence of events taking place over the course of Thor Volume 2, issues 80 to 85, Ragnarok plays out, resulting in the destruction of Asgard and the deaths of most Asgardians. Again, for reasons, the souls of these perished Asgardians are reincarnated within new bodies. This reincarnation cycle results in Loki's soul being reborn in the body of a woman, specifically in Thor Volume 3, Issue 5. Now, based on visual similarities between the 2, namely the broken horns, I think it's relatively safe to assume the majority of this character is based on Lady Loki. However, it's also important to note that that might not be an open and shut case. A fan on Twitter, combing through the international credits, noticed this. Sophia DiMartino playing someone called Sylvie. This is a completely different character. In the comics, the character of Sylvie Ashton is just a regular girl from Broxton, Oklahoma. When the Asgardians, homeless after the destruction of their homeworld, seek refuge in this town, Sylvie one day wakes up to find she has magic-based powers, including sorcery, teleportation, and telekinesis, among others. She takes the name Enchantress, and we later find out that it was Loki who gave her these powers, for seemingly no other reason than because Loki is a ball of chaos and unpredictability. It could be either character, but personally, I think Marvel might be doing what they've done many times before in the MCU, and that's combining different aspects of different comic stories and characters to create something new and unique. For example, the Ragnarok and Planet Hulk stories in the comics had literally nothing to do with each other. They were combined in the film Thor Ragnarok to create something totally unique and pretty awesome. I'm sure we'll get more concrete answers as we move forward, but for now I'm going to call DiMartino Lady Loki until we're told otherwise. She retreats into a time door and her plan enacts itself. We see primed reset canisters. Loki is faced with a choice, and he chooses to pursue Lady Loki into the time door. It closes right before a furious Mobius catches up to it, and then the episode ends on that zinger. Now, this episode was great, but I wasn't expecting a whole lot of it. I honestly didn't expect Lady Loki to be revealed so soon. Neither did I expect to see her plan enacted, or our Loki coming before her face to face. I thought these were all things that we were going to see leading up to or going into the finale. So I don't really know where we're going to go from here, what the show's going to be about, which I kind of like, because now they're keeping us guessing. I am going to stick to my guns with one thing, though. I don't think Loki's going to betray the TVA. We've been given glimpses of his humanity, of him enjoying actually being a good person, and I think that his decision to pursue Lady Loki was to try and stop her, not join her. Again, we're going to find out, but I'm prepared to die on this hill. While we wait for next week's episode, please, if you could, let me know in the comments if you think Loki's going to default to a villain or play the hero or land somewhere in between. If you like this video, if you could, please like it, share it to a friend, and subscribe to the channel if you like the content that I put out. Remember, time is your most valuable resource, and I'm always happy you chose to spend some of it with me. I'll see you guys next week for episode 3.